Ahead of our parish gift day on Sunday the 11th of April, we are having 2 days of prayer and fasting. These are on Holy Saturday the 3rd of April and Easter Saturday the 10th of April. But what is fasting and why might we do it?
So we wanted to just share a few thoughts about fasting for those of you that are not familiar with it or perhaps haven't practiced it in the past. So the first thing really to say about fasting is that when we're talking about fasting, we're largely talking about the abstinence from food. So we know that in our Lenten practice that it's possible to fast from other things as well, to abstain from anything really. But when we're referring to fasting in particular, it's usually we're usually talking about fasting from food, and certainly in this situation that's what we're talking about. So the first thing to note about fasting really is that Jesus just simply assumed that it would be part of the normal worship and prayer life of those people that followed him. So in Matthew's Gospel, in the Sermon on the Mount, we see Jesus teaching the crowd, and he simply says to them, when you fast, don't make a big show out of it, but do it in private, and God, who sees the secret things, will reward you. So Jesus just assumed that they would fast, that they were already fasting, and that they would continue to do so as his disciples. And of course we see Jesus give us the example of fasting. So he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, where he was tempted by the devil. And at the end of that period of prayer and fasting and obedience, he was led out of the wilderness, Luke tells us, in the power of the Spirit, and he began his ministry. And as we then read the rest of the Gospels, we see that Jesus developed a pattern of prayer and devotion for himself that included fasting. And when we wind forward into the book of Acts and we see the life of the early church, we see there that both as individuals and as a corporate body, as a group of people, they had times of prayer and fasting together. So why did Jesus just assume that fasting was already part of their lives and would continue to be so? Well, when we read the Old Testament, we see that fasting was a very normal part of the worship and spiritual life of God's Old Testament people of faith. They fasted in a number of different situations. So in times of individual or corporate loss and grief, they fasted from food. And this was a physical expression of the inward pain and sorrow and grief that they were experiencing. So an outward physical expression of a pain and sorrow inside. They also fasted in particular situations, both individually and corporately, of particular trouble or crisis. And in these situations, the physical fast was a physical expression and sign of the sincerity and eagerness with which they were calling out to God for his help and his deliverance. So again, a physical expression of an inward desire and desperation expressed to God for his help. And one of the third very significant situations in which both as individuals and as a nation people fasted and prayed was in times of repentance. And in this situation, the abstinence from food, the fast, was again a physical expression of the sincerity with which the people were turning away from sin and turning back to God. It was an expression of their mourning, of their grief over their individual or national sin. And often you find when you read the stories in the Old Testament that these last two situations came together, that when individuals or the nation were calling on God for deliverance and fasting, they were also coming to God in repentance. They were individually or corporately putting their hearts right before God, turning back to Him, turning away from sin and back to Him, at the same time as calling on Him for His deliverance. The repentance paved the way for God to act on their behalf and to come to their aid. And it's really in this spirit that Ange is calling us to these 2 days of prayer and fasting. It's an opportunity for us to come as a people before God and to earnestly call out to Him for His help and His deliverance and His guiding. Particularly acutely at the moment, we're calling on Him for His help in terms of the financial situation that we're in, but we're also more broadly calling on Him, asking Him to come and to guide us into the future as we seek to serve Him in the parish, and to work among us for the extension of His kingdom and for growth. And as we do that, we want to come before Him in a spirit of repentance, to be open to Him, to show us anything that we as a people, as a church, need to be putting right with Him and repenting of. So we're encouraging you to join us in prayer and in fasting, to seek His help and in an attitude of repentance. So let me finally just say a few words about what's happening for us and why fasting is helpful. So our human experience is a physical, lived experience. We experience the world through our 5 senses: touch, sight, hearing, smell, taste, and they're all physical senses, aren't they? And through them we encounter the world and we encounter life. And many of the desires that dominate our day-to-day experience are physical desires. But alongside those physical desires, we know that we also have spiritual desires. We are physical beings, but we are also emotional and rational and spiritual. And so alongside the physical desires are spiritual ones, desires for God and for His kingdom and for His action among us. And fasting allows us to physically give expression to our desire to prioritise our spiritual desires, our hunger after God. It's a physical sign that we are giving priority to our desire for God and for His work among us. And one of the ways of, I guess, thinking about this or illustrating this is to think about tuning a radio. In the olden days, of course, before digital radios where we could preset channels, we used to have to tune a radio by the big dial. And if there was a particular program on a particular channel that we wanted to listen to, we would tune through the other channels. We would deny ourselves the interesting things that we heard from other channels as we tuned into the particular channel and program that we desired to listen to at that time. And it wasn't that there was anything wrong or bad about some of the other things that we could have chosen to listen to that were interesting to us as we went through the channels. It's just that we were denying ourselves those in order to listen to and to satisfy our desire for a particular program. And so we would tune in to that desired program at the exclusion of other things. And in a sense, that's a picture of what we're doing when we fast. We're choosing to deny ourselves the physical desire that we normally satisfy so readily in order to tune into and prioritise our spiritual hunger for God and our spiritual desire for Him to come and to move among us, to come to our deliverance and to guide us into the future. So we hope that you will join us in prayer and in fasting if you are able to. Let me just say a word about doing that safely, though. For some people, they might have health conditions that mean it's unwise to fast from food. So please, if that's you, just fast from something else instead. Abstain from something else you love. Maybe abstain from cups of tea if that's one of the things that forms the shape and fabric of your day, as it does us in the vicarage. Or if you could fast just for a single meal and not for the whole day, then please do that. So do it safely, and whether you're able to fast or not, please do join us in prayer, seeking God's help, but also coming before him humbly in repentance.
On both days, you can join us to pray from 9:30 until 10:30 a.m. on Zoom, or from 12:30 to 1 p.m. outside St Albans, and from 6 until 6:30 p.m. outside St Bart's. Do bring your own chair to either of those if you need it. Or you can pray on your own, of course. Some things we are praying for. For growth in our church family, especially with children and young adults. Our regular giving to increase, and some extra donations this year. The health and unity of our parish coming out of the pandemic, and a new vision to be emerging for our parish's part in God's mission in the world. Fast, pray, give.